3, 2, 1, and we're underway.
Hello and welcome to Cycling Insights, your cycling podcast brought to you by L'Etape Australia by Tour de France. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on your favourite podcast app. Give us a follow and leave us a review. Hello and welcome to Cycling Insights. As me, Matt Keenan and Simon Gerrans, debriefer on the Tour de France. Have a look at who succeeded, who flopped, and what to expect for 2021. We'll take you backstage with Simon on the ground and my experience here in Melbourne, commentating with Robbie in Sydney and Bridie with me in Melbourne. And we'll take a look at the World Championships, which are just around the corner. They're happening this weekend. Gerro, good to catch up with you after a month on the road. Must have been some experience for you to go back to the tour, just talking about it on the easy side of the fence.
Yeah, Matt, great to be back, and what a tour we experienced. And it was so good to be back in the Tour de France, but seeing it from a whole new perspective this year.
Did you think that the event would actually go ahead, say, 2 months ago?
I didn't know. I think everyone was speculating whether it was going to go ahead or not. But the big thing was, once we were there, everyone was that had their masks on and their fingers crossed the whole time. Everyone was so hopeful that the tour was going to make it to Paris. And you should have seen the size of relief from everyone from within ASO. You can see from the teams as well. Everyone was so happy to get through the Tour de France and to make it all the way to Paris. It was really great to be a part of.
Well, I couldn't see any of it because everybody was wearing a mask, including those who won stages and were on the podium. All right, so we'll have a bit more of a chat about that in a moment. But I want to go through the tour itself, and we have to start at the top with the surprise winner in many respects with Tadej Pogačar. But I have to say that I did a video 2 weeks before the race got underway for SBS, and I said Roglic was the favourite and Pogačar was the dark horse. He was the smoky that could get the win. So I'm just going to go and post that everywhere I possibly can.
Just keep reposting that one. Yeah, you and Eddie Merckx.
Wasn't it a phenomenal performance, that last individual time trial, and watching Tom Dumoulin and Wout van Aert watch Tadej take the yellow jersey away from Primoz.
They just had a look of sheer disbelief on their faces. And I think myself, like the entire cycling world, and especially the Jumbo-Visma team, they thought they had this Tour de France wrapped up. There was not one chink in Roglic's armour for the entire 3 weeks until that point. And he actually didn't even put in a bad time trial himself. He only finished 30 seconds behind Dumoulin and Richie Port. So his performance was solid. But they were just blown out of the water by Tadej Pogačar there, and nobody saw it coming.
Yeah, and he won by 1 minute and 21 seconds ahead of the former world champion in the individual time trial and Richie Port. And significantly, he was quicker than Dumoulin and Wout van Aert on the flat part of the course. It wasn't just time that was taken up the climb. It was a huge performance.
Yeah, it was an incredible performance. And just watching him right from the start of that, I thought, he's attacked this pretty hard. You can see he's really going for it here. Is he going to pay the price on the climb? Is he going to leave all his energy on the flats? Because it was a super hard climb up to the Planche de Belfi. So I thought, hey, has he gone too hard here? Maybe Roglic will sort of come back and claw a bit of time back. But they just couldn't respond. And Tadej Pogačar just got better and better.
What was the atmosphere on the ground? Because you were there. We were just watching it from afar and commentating to the screen.
The atmosphere was electric. Basically, on the ground there, everyone was just so blown away by his performance. From in the commentary booth and speaking to everybody sort of around in ASO, everyone was like, I need to have a lay down. Like, that was such a buzz seeing that happen. It was literally an historical moment in cycling and in sport.
And there's been all those comparisons with Fignon and Le Monde in 89 and then this one in 2020. And I've even seen the photos of doing the compare and contrast between them. And there are enormous similarities. And also in the attitude of Tadej Pogačar before it. He was always saying, well, I'm going all in. I'm still trying to win. And most people thought 57 seconds, it's too much. And I saw a video of Le Monde 2 days before that final individual time trial. And even the great Paul Sherwin, he asked him, 50 seconds, is it too much? Has Fignon won the tour? Oh, no. He better have some restless night's sleep because I'm coming. He might still win the tour, but I'm going to give it everything I've got. He won't be winning by 50 seconds. It was perfect in the lead-in to that final time trial.
Well, how good were the interviews with Seb Piquet? asking Tadej Pogacar leading up to that point, what's the plan now? Is it polka dot jersey? Is it white jersey? And it's like, no. The plan is to still go for yellow. The plan is to still try and win the Tour. So he didn't give up on his plan the whole time. And you could just see how relaxed about it he was. The talk around the UAE Team Emirates is that Tadej Pogacar was the most relaxed guy on that day. They might have been nervous, but they were giving him some space. We saw some great footage of the warm-up of Pogacar and the warm-up of Roglic. Pogacar was there, skin suit rolled down, casual sunglasses on, with his sort of earphones on, just doing his own thing, looking super relaxed. Primoz Roglic was a completely different story. He had about 6 people around him. He had teammates putting his numbers on for him. He just looked like a ball of stress, like he had everything to lose. So it was just such a contrasting approach to that time trial. And you can see that it really worked for Tadej Pogacar because he was relaxed. He raced the time trial of his life, and he managed to put enough time into Roglic.
And I think that was a big benefit of youth. So he's 21, about to celebrate his 22nd birthday, which he did on Monday. And, it's my first attempt. If I don't win this one, I've got so many in front of me. By contrast, Roglic, 30 years of age, he's 8-9 years older than the guy that's trying to take the yellow jersey away from him. And it's been a 5-year campaign to get to that point. Oh my God, what if I don't win now? And then Ineos come back next year with Bernal. Froome returns to the Tour as well. This is my chance. And the pressure clearly got to him somewhat. But you're right, he still put in a really good performance. You finished 5th in an uphill time trial at the Tour de France. You've ridden well.
Yeah, I think the reason people are questioning his performance, and did he crack? He looked so dishevelled when he crossed the finish line. His helmet was too far back on his head. He was just white in his face. He just looked like a broken man. So everyone's like, oh, he cracked. But the fact of the matter is his performance wasn't too bad. And as far as the pressure goes, it was all about Primoz Roglic from so far out in this Tour de France. The team was built around him. He's got guys in that squad that have won Grand Tours in the past, sacrificing their chances for him. And he talked about time and time again this 5-year plan that he's put together that was all about winning the Tour de France this year. So can you imagine the pressure on his shoulders going into this final time trial? It's no wonder, you couldn't question him if he did sort of start to feel the effects of that. But old Tadej Pogacar, completely different approach, cool, calm and collected, everything to gain and nothing to lose, and it paid for him.
Okay, so how does Pogacar deal with the stardom? And the one quote that I heard from him that gives me great confidence that he's going to be able to deal with it was after the stage in Paris, he was asked about, okay, so tomorrow's your 22nd birthday, you're going to have a big party? And he responded with, I'm not really that into birthdays.
And what I also liked is I actually ran into David de la Cruz the next day on Monday morning at the airport on my way home. And I said to him, congratulations on winning the Tour. Did you have a good party last night? He said, we actually just went out for a pizza. No one was actually anticipating that we were going to win, so there was no big party planned. The team didn't actually make that big a deal out of it. So it seems as though he's just going to take it in his stride, and it doesn't really look like he will let all that stuff affect him. On top of that, probably on one side to his advantage, but also to his disadvantage, there's not going to be a big series of post-tour criteriums and all that sort of thing that normally the yellow jersey is expected to attend. He's just going to go on. I see he's racing the World Championships this weekend. So he literally just has to reset and focus on the next objective.
And it's going to be a tighter turnaround between seasons as well, which I think will be a blessing. And as a youngster, you look back historically at youngsters that have made it to the podium in terms of guys that are 23 or below. And Coppi was on the podium as a 21-year-old. So too was Gino Bartoli, Jacques Anquetil, Eddie Merckx, Greg LeMond, Laurent Fignon. The greats of the sport have made it to the podium at a really young age. It's not new. It's just that we're in the presence potentially of a great, but it's not a foregone conclusion. Jan Ullrich was second in his first tour. He won his second tour, and then he never won again. We've seen Egan Bernal. He won last year, and a lot of people thought he's with Ineos Grenadiers. They've got the biggest budget. He's won the race already at 22 years of age. Domination is on its way. He doesn't finish the tour this year. So nothing is guaranteed.
No, nothing is guaranteed. And I think that's the beauty of cycling. You see a young rider come along and really dominate for a period of time, and you think, they're going to be unbeatable for so many years. But the wheel turns, as they say in cycling. You're on the top one moment, you're very quickly on the bottom. So things can go wrong very quickly. So it's not a foregone conclusion that he's going to dominate this sport, but he's certainly putting himself in good stead for future performances. So I think he'll bounce back really well from this. How do you think Roglic is going to bounce back from the disappointment of losing this tour on the penultimate day?
Well, that's the hardest part. That's a lot more difficult. So UAE, they're going to have to go and spend a whole bunch of money and get some recruits to look after the defending champion at the tour next year. But what does Jumbo-Visma do? And how do they rebuild Roglic and they rebuild his morale and come back again at the tour next year and try and win it? And I think they have to, because if they don't come back and get back on the horse and have another go at it, well, Roglic is never going to have another comfortable night's sleep for the rest of his life, I don't think. You know, Laurent Fignon speaks about the fact that, well, he did, sadly he's passed away, but he spoke about the fact that he was always referred to as the guy that finished second in the tour by 8 seconds. And he said, no, I'm not. I won the tour twice. Roglic has not won the tour yet. If he wins the tour now after this, then this one gets washed away in a significant way. They have to come back and they have to target it, I think, in the same manner in which they did, but learn their lessons from not taking the opportunities when they were there. I think maybe there was a few opportunity in the mountain stages that didn't finish at the top of a mountain where they didn't really take that full opportunity. They come back with Kruijswijk as Dumoulin, who will be full strength next year, I think, and they come back with a 2-pronged or a 3-pronged attack. So as we're not just watching one guy and it's not just all on Primož Roglic's shoulders, and they have to try and win it as a team. But that's going to be a really tough process to rebuild that. How do you as a teammate console Roglic in that moment and then start that rebuilding phase? I don't know.
Well, funnily enough, from an insight from a teammate, I'm quite close with George Bennett. And what he's spoken about with Primož Roglic is he's a pretty even guy. He doesn't get overexcited when he wins. He sort of takes that in his stride. Which is sometimes probably a little bit disappointing. But on the plus side, when he loses, he's also not overly disappointed. He seems to recover from those losses reasonably quickly. So he's a fairly level guy, which is a little bit strange for a big team leader because normally it's quite emotional. You really get involved in the hype. And when you lose, you really feel like you're letting a lot of people down. So the highs and lows are very extreme, but not for Primož Roglic, which would indicate to me that he's probably going to recover from this pretty well, reset, and that 5-year plan he had in place, maybe it gets pushed out to 6 years. But I agree with you in the fact that Jumbo-Visma really need to reset, refocus, and having the strongest team in the race, they need to really play to that strength is use options to attack in the final. If Tadej Pogačar had to follow 3 riders attacking the final, it'd be very different just to sitting on the wheel of Primož Roglic.
Yeah, and that's maybe the one mistake that they made, and Tom Dumoulin made it on the Col de Peyresourde by being selfless, by making that call really early. I'm not good. Let's go all in for Primož. Even if he didn't feel good, nobody else needed to know that. And if they kept that card up their sleeve, it put the doubt into everybody else's mind. But hindsight's a wonderful thing. It's easy to say this when you're sitting in a comfortable chair as opposed to on the saddle at threshold in the heat of battle.
Yeah, that's right. It is very easy in hindsight. They say hindsight's 20/20, but I think they will have taken an enormous amount of experience away from this tour, and that will put them in good stead to continue to challenge for the Tour de France in years to come. A team that got it very right in this year's tour, Matt, Team Sunweb.
They were my favourite team as bang for buck. I mean, they nailed it. I loved Mark Hershey right from the very start when he was second on the stage into Nice. And then, he eventually got his stage win into Serein. But my favourite moment for them was the first stage that was won by Søren Kragh Andersen into Lyon in the way they set it up. So the early break, it looked like a big break was going to go that day. So they made sure they had 2 in it. There's only 2 other guys out there. Back you come. Save the resources. This one isn't going to work. They didn't get stuck in tradition. Then we got down to the finale, and there's a couple of climbs. First climb, Tish Benoot goes up the road. All the other big leaders, they go, that guy's good. He won a stage at Paris-Nice this year, and he finished second overall. We better chase. So the leaders have their key domestiques chase. Then you get to the next climb, and then the leaders start attacking, and Mark Hershey attacks. So then Alaphilippe and Sagan go, Sunweb, that's their guy. Let's chase him. They chase down the young star, Mark Hershey. As soon as he gets caught, they're all full with lactic acid. Søren Kragh Andersen, the time trial specialist from that team, whooshka, straight over the top. They're all looking at each other because they've just chased down Mark Hershey. He takes a look over his shoulder, 15 seconds in the blink of an eye. Brilliant stage win, tactical perfection. Loved it.
Yeah, I love that performance. And I also love you touched on Mark Hershey. What was impressive about his performances in the Tour de France is that he was able to follow Alaphilippe there on stage 2 when he attacked of the Col du Quatre Chemins. He was the only rider able to respond initially to Alaphilippe's attack. He finished second in that stage, and you would have thought, young guy, first tour, that's a great result. He's going to be pleased with that. No, he was devastated. And what I really liked about that was that showed us that he's a winner and he really wants to achieve in this race, and he didn't give up on that. The next great ride from Mark Hershey was his 90-kilometre solo effort on stage, I think it was stage 9, to get caught in the final couple of kilometres by the group of the sort of GC favourites, able to immediately reset, refocus and think, I've been caught, I can still win this stage. I love the way that he raced.
That moment at 1 kilometre to go, he's been out there solo for so long, at a K to go, and he's in the group with Pogačar, Roglic, the favourites to win overall. He leans over, he tightens up his shoes. I'm in this.
Yeah, very much so. But yeah, going back to what you're saying about Team Sunweb, I really love the way they worked as a team to set up the riders to attack. So they were still very much working for a leader on any particular day. However, they were working as a team to set up that leader. They weren't working as a team as we normally expect to see, with the whole team on the front trying to set a leader up in a certain way. They were strategically placing the right guys in the breakaways. So when they attacked, they had a sort of 2-3-pronged attack. But it was all about setting up the right guy at the right time.
So how does an established star like Romain Bardet integrate into that team? And what role does he play?
Well, it's going to be an interesting one for Bardet, because if he's expecting to go to this team and have a full team of support at the Tour de France, he's not going to get that. He needs to learn to use that team dynamic and maybe have one guy that stays with him as his sort of loyal supporter on the road to keep him out of the wind, make sure he stayed up the front. But he needs to learn to play with the fact that he's going to have teammates that are jumping off the front, that are going for all their possibilities, and he needs to support that in a certain way. So when it comes to the important GC days, he also gets the support of those guys. It's going to be a bit of a challenge for Bardet.
Yeah, but I think he would have been watching the Tour after he had to abandon because of that horrible crash, rubbing his hands together thinking, I've made a good decision. I'm going to the right place. And I think it'll be good for him because it won't be a French team. There'll be pressure on other people, not just on him. I think he's going to be able to flourish.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think we see so many of the French riders that do flourish. They do step out of their comfort zone at some point in their careers and spend some time in a foreign team. And I think it's the right time for Romain Bardet to do that. And he's a guy that speaks great English. He's well respected in the bunch. I think it's a good move for Bardet.
Outside the comfort zone, otherwise known as the improvement zone. Big story from Australia, obviously Richie Port becoming just the second Aussie. Australians have been going to the Tour since 1914. Until this year, only one Australian had reached the podium inside the top 3, obviously, Cadel Evans. Richie Port made the podium. That puts him amongst the greats of Australian sport, in my view.
For me, Richie was already amongst the greats of Australian sport, but it was so good to see Richie standing on the podium. He's worked so hard for that result, so many years over, and it was shaping up like he would never get it. Never get that result that really looked like he deserved. You look at Richie's Palmars and he has won across the board. He's won week-long stage races. We've seen him perform so many times at the highest level, but he's also always just sort of flopped or failed to deliver a GC performance in a Grand Tour. So I was so pleased for Richie that he was finally able to get up onto the podium. He acknowledged that he would have to do the time trial of his life on stage 20. Not only did he do that, Lopez had a shocker. So just the mix was right for him this year, so I'm very happy for Richie.
Yeah, and all those other results that you talk of, those of us in the cycling community, the hardcore cycling community, recognise those results. But for people that are just casual observers of the Tour, this result validates those other results. It actually has them take notice of what Paris-Nice is, has them take notice of what a Tour of Romandy is, what's the Tour Down Under mean. It gives them more gravitas now, those results, because he has reached the podium. I think, we talk about people, being the first loser when they finish second, which I always think is absolute garbage. Richie won third place.
Yes, I would agree, because it wasn't reliant on other people sort of bombing out or anything like that. He performed really well. He had his fair share of mishaps. We saw him, lose time in the crosswind. We saw him have a very untimely puncher as well, which he was able to recover from quickly. So he fought all the way to Paris for that result. So it was really good.
Before we continue with the show, a big thank you to this episode's sponsor, L'Etape Australia by Tour de France. L'Etape Australia is the only Tour de France event in Australia. No matter if you're an elite rider or a weekend warrior, everyone is welcome at L'Etape. For more information and to register for L'Etape Australia, visit letapeaustralia.com. It's LETAPE Australia.com. letapeaustralia.com. We'll see you on the road. Now, I think just that puncher on stage 18, double stage 9, by the way, but that was a career-defining moment. In the same way as Cadel, the way he won in Mendrisio or saved his tour to the Galibier, because Richie stayed super calm. He kept riding the flat front wheel, the puncher, until the car got there. He didn't take neutral service. He didn't panic, and he rode himself back into the race. He won loads of fans in Australia that night. And you don't have to win the stage to win fans. The way he conducted himself was all of his experience coming in to those last 15 kilometres. It was brilliant.
Yeah, and on top of that, he actually got a little bit of support by the guys in the chase group with him who didn't have to help him. You could see Van Aert and Tom Dumoulin both give Richie a turn to come back to that front group. Obviously, they wanted to be there themselves, but it would have been very easy for them just to sit back and go, you know what, you're chasing your 4th place on GC here. You need to close this gap. They gave him a bit of a turn, enabled him to recover a little bit, and then he was able to shut it down. So this accumulation, obviously, that hard work, the respect he has from the guys that he's racing against, that really helped him come together at that point.
Yeah. Okay, King Caleb, he won 2 stages. Last year he won 3. How do you define this year for Caleb?
Well, if you look at the support and the guys that Caleb had around him, he had a couple of guys dedicated there to his lead out. And when you look at that support around him, he did exceptionally well. But what Caleb did is he really relied on the fact that he's a very cunning sprinter and he's very explosive. You saw his wins, and he came from a long way back each time, found a way through, and he was able to win the stage. The stages that were very fast to the finish, where there were good lead-outs going on, he couldn't feature because he didn't have that support. So when you take into account what the support that Caleb had, to win 2 stages is unbelievable.
Yeah, I think it's on par with the 3 from last year, because stage 1, he had Gilbert out with a fractured patella, and he had Degenkolb outside the time delay because he'd stopped to help Caleb return, and Caleb crashed on that first stage. I thought he was fantastic, and he just got caught out of position a couple of times because of a lack of teammates. He can be really happy with it. There were a few that didn't deliver on expectations. Clearly, Ineos. So since Wiggins won in 2012 with Sky, they'd won every year except 2014 with Astana, courtesy of Vincenzo Nibali. This year, it fell apart from them pretty early, and the writing was probably on the wall before the race even started. Were you surprised to see it go so pear-shaped for Ineos Grenadiers?
Well, firstly, we were a little bit surprised with Ineos Grenadiers because they took a different approach as they went all in behind one guy. They didn't take a backup plan. Nearly every other year they've gone to the Tour de France, they've had a backup plan. So they put a huge amount of expectation on Egan Bernal's shoulders there. He was carrying a lot of pressure into that point. So that was a bit of a bizarre situation for them. And if there was one year they should have taken a backup plan, it was this year. Again, hindsight's 2020. So they fell apart when it comes to the GC because their leader obviously had some issues. It was interesting to find out that they were aware of these issues leading into the tour, and they still gambled on taking him as the sole team leader. They didn't take Froome or Thomas, 1 as a backup, 2 to take a bit of the pressure off Egan Bernal. So yeah, it was a bit of a bizarre sort of environment for them to be in like that. I was very impressed the way their team switched focus very quickly and went on the attack, and they were able to really dominate the big mountain performances.
I was really happy to see that stage win for Mikhail Kwiatkowski with all the service he's given to the team. And I'm really looking forward now to seeing Ineos Grenadiers return in 2021 with Egan Bernal. I think I'm already excited about that. I really am. In the same way I am about Peter Sagan returning to see if he can win an 8th green jersey, because finally he's been beaten head to head. It's the first time he's made it to Paris without the green jersey on.
Yeah, Peter Sagan wasn't on it this year, was it? You could see right from the start he wasn't. He didn't have any real punch in the finals, and we were obviously analysing Peter Sagan's performances all the way through the tour, and he just didn't look like he had it. He's obviously had a very sort of different preparation to what he's used to, and he, having won at the Tour de France so consistently over so many years, he would have this preparation down pat. I do altitude this race, before this race I do that race, then I do some more altitude, I do this training, and I'm on form at the tour. He didn't have that this year.
Yeah. Just looking again at next year, Chris Froome, can he return and make an impact on the race? Can he be a contender?
I don't think so. I think he's that little bit older. It's going to be a period of time since he's been at the Tour de France. He's going to be in a complete new environment, not an environment that he's familiar to winning with. So I can't see Chris Froome having a massive impact at the Tour de France next year with Israel Startup Nation.
There'll be plenty of hype around it, though, before the start. One of the things that always catches our attention is Thibaut Pinot. How can a guy that so early in the race has fallen that far behind get so much camera time?
Well, they love him in France, don't they? And I think, in all honesty, the French, they love a loser. They love a guy who tries so hard and doesn't perform. Thibaut Pinot, he's a charismatic guy, and he's quite humble, and I think he's quite well liked, but he's emotional. He cries when he loses. He's overjoyed, along with Marc Madio, his team director. They are overjoyed when they win, and I think the public love that. So not only do they love to see Thibaut Pinot win, they love to see him lose as well, because they know they're going to get an emotional reaction.
Yeah, they get plenty out of him. On that topic, Cofidis have put so much money into the sport, and they haven't won a stage since 2008. They recruited the Italian sprinter Elia Viviani, who has not won a race this year. Sure, it's been a tough year. It's been interrupted, and he had tough lockdown circumstances, but he didn't look anywhere near it.
No, he didn't even look close, did he? There's a number of times he got himself into the right position to win a sprint finish, and he just couldn't finish it off. He's been mediocre. However, tell me a rider that's left De Koning Quickstep and performed the very next year.
I can't think of any.
No, De Koning Quickstep have an amazing sort of culture within their team where they all win. It's very rare that you see a rider step out of that winning environment and is able to replicate that somewhere else. Often riders will still win a race here or there, but they never perform the same the year after leaving De Koning Quickstep. Elia Viviani, he took Sabatini with him to Cofidis, and he wasn't at the tour. He also had Consoni there with him at the tour as a lead-out guy, but they just didn't get it together, and Viviani just couldn't finish it off.
The only one who saved the tour for Cofidis was Guillaume Martin. He got plenty of publicity, and I thought he rode really well. I thought he was good.
Yeah, he was good, and he didn't give it up on the fact, even though when he lost a bit of time towards the end of the race, he was still on the attack. He was still saying, where can I get some of this time back? He didn't have great support. Like, he didn't have guys around him in the mountains. But Cofidis, they were really pleased just to have the best Frenchman in the general classification. So for that to win, it should be a whole separate jersey.
Yeah, that's a title in it. Well, here's a rider for you that's left the Koenig Quickstep and improved. Enric Mas.
You think he's improved?
He finished inside the top 5 at the Tour de France for the first time.
Yeah, he was on the podium at the Vuelta with the Koenig Quickstep.
Yeah, okay. Well, he's at least on par.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought he was good, and he's carrying the expectations of the Movistar team. I thought he was pretty good, Enric Mas.
No, he was good. He was consistent. He's definitely a guy for the future. Whether Enric Mas has a knockout blow to win these big races, I don't think so. I think he's going to be a podium contender every year, and he will definitely help Movistar win the team's classification.
Oh, it's such an important outfit. I mean, what a prize to win. They've won it 5 of the last 6 years. In any team that you've ridden with at the Tour, have they spoken about the team's classification before the race has started?
Yes, AG Tour.
Really?
Really.
And what was your reaction?
Well, the team's classification is important to these guys because it's something to tell the sponsors about. It's to represent the team and actually to have the sponsors up there. It is a big deal to a lot of teams. But when the team's classification is spoken about, when you need to be the third rider across the line, because they're thinking about team's classification being based on the best 3 finishes of each team each day. If you're in the mountains and there's 2 guys from your team up the road and you're falling back, you are getting a real rev up on your race radio about you're the third man on the road, you need to go all the way to the line today. So it's definitely talked about within the teams.
Oh, God. So I always find it fascinating how much Movistar focus on it. So for both of us this year was a really different experience, the Tour. I was commentating for the first time from Melbourne. the SBS team were predominantly up in Sydney, and I had Bridie with me in Melbourne, just her and I, and we had Robbie McEwen on Google Meets to be able to make eye contact with him. And then you were on the ground in France commentating for the world feed. So it was a bizarre experience.
It was a very different tour for me, obviously, seeing it for the first time from behind the scenes. But for yourself, Matt, you only really know the Tour de France from behind the scenes in France. How was it from Melbourne, completely separated? You were, 10,000 kilometres away.
Yeah, it was strange to get the feel from it. You helped me a lot with the audio recordings that you sent through to describe the last few kilometres that you'd ridden and so on. But you didn't get to interact with anybody, which you didn't get to do anyway because of the coronavirus. But it was weird because we're in lockdown. We've got the curfew in Melbourne. So driving home, I had the roads to myself. There was not a single car on the road, and I had the permit there ready to go in the front seat in case I got pulled over by the police. Didn't get pulled over once. I was hoping to get pulled over so I could say, hey, I got my permit. And then to come home each day, like to commentate on the tour, sleep in my own bed and have a coffee in the morning with my wife and kids was bizarre in itself, but in a good way. That was actually the highlight of the tour, being able to share it with my family. And then my kids, to work out just how little interest they have in that when I'd be preparing before I go into the studio and SBS, and they'd tell me how boring my job is, Dad. You talk about cycling all the time.
So you got to enjoy the experience, the upsides of not being on the road, because in all honesty, there weren't that many sort of downsides, I don't think, this year about not being at the tour. With the bubbles and whatnot that were in place, there was very little interaction with the other commentators or the other people following the race, and there was zero interaction with anybody involved in the race itself, as in within the riders' bubble. So I think it would have been really good to call it from home, because basically on the road, you had all the inconveniences of being on the road, changing hotels every day, long transfers, late nights, bad coffee, all that sort of stuff. And very little upside.
Yeah, I didn't miss any of that at all. I never got lost. I found my accommodation every night and I had good coffee. So it was all right.
Yeah. But for my experience actually seeing it from behind the scenes, it was amazing. As a rider, you have such a sort of tunnel vision of the Tour de France. All you're thinking about is your performances and your results and the results of your team and what's happening within your team and within the race. You're completely oblivious to the thousands of people that are running around behind the scenes making the circus sort of go on.
Yeah. Well, the next race on the calendar is the World Championships, which is a race that you've performed in really well in the past. You've been a silver medalist at the World Championships. They're strange this year. There's no juniors, there's no under 23s, it's just the elites. It's the time trials on Thursday and Friday, and the road races on Saturday and Sunday. What I want to get from you is, what's the atmosphere like when you go to the team hotel and you've got a squad, the men and the women coming together, and they're people from different trade teams throughout the year that are often your rivals?
It's actually a really cool environment generally, because, when I was racing the World Championships, I was racing alongside many of the guys that I went sort of through the under 23 programs with and all that sort of thing. So it was a bit of a reunion. And the fact that, I was a part of a number of Australian teams throughout my racing career, it was always good to see so many of those people again. There were a number of people that would come over from Australia for the event, so it was always good to check in with them. But as far as the racing goes, it's a bit of a bizarre environment in the fact that you're racing alongside guys but you don't necessarily race much with. So just working out that dynamic of who's going to work with who in the team and what are the tactics going to be on the road is a bit of a different feel.
So I look at the Belgium team, say in the men's race, and they've got a favourite, Wout van Aert from Lotto Soudal. They've got Tish Benoit from Sunweb. They've got Greg Van Avermaet from CCC. They've got Tim Wellens from Lotto Soudal. They've got a whole bunch of different teams represented, and they're all quality riders. How do they come together?
Well, on paper, you look at Van Aert and say, he's got to be a big favourite for the race. But you peel that onion back one layer and you look at the support he's going to have, and he's mainly going to have one or two riders there supporting him. So that is a big disadvantage for Wout van Aert, because if you look across to, say, the Danish team with Jakob Fuglsang, he's an out-and-out leader of that team and he should get really good support. So for me, he's a big favourite. Also, the Italians with Nibali. Who else do they have to really step up? He may not go for pedal for pedal against Van Aert, but the fact that he has the full support of the team, for me, puts him as a big contender, psychologically as well.
And he's smart. He's really smart, Nibali. And then I look across at the French team, Julien Alaphilippe. He was below par at the Tour. Does he recover and come up after the Tour? Will he be better or worse for this week's rest?
He will be worse. He was chasing another win so hard at the Tour de France. He looked like he was going so deep every day and he just couldn't deliver. He was racing like he had the best form of his life. And when it comes to it, he couldn't perform. So I think he will have dug himself in a really big hole in the Tour de France, chasing another result when he didn't have the form to back it up. If he had have just in the third week, maybe tried once, if it worked, fantastic. If it didn't work, he should have been riding in the Gruppetto every day just to try and conserve a bit of energy for the World Championships.
And then what about at Slovenia with Roglic just having finished second at the Tour and Pogačar together as teammates? How do they go?
How are they going to work it out if they both end up in the front group chasing the win? Who's going to work for who there? Because they need to choose. They need to go with one or the other. In a one-day race, it's very difficult to go with a number of options, particularly when you get down to a select group.
Well, in 87, Stephen Roach, he said, okay, I've won the Giro this year. I've won the Tour. Sean Kelly, I'm all in for you. And he spent the whole day telling Sean Kelly, I'm working for you, I'm working for you, I'm working for you. And then the window opened up at the end in the last couple of kilometres and he jumped through it and he won the race. He won the world title.
Yeah, and got the Triple Crown. Yeah. But as far as the course goes, let's just talk about the course for a second. A 28.8 kilometre lap. The men do complete this lap 9 times. The women complete it 5 times. On this course is 3 pretty tricky climbs. So it's going to be a very selective parkour. It's going to be very much like an Ardennes Classic.
Yeah, which I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it. On the women's side, Amanda Spratt's not sure if she is or isn't going to be racing because she had that nasty fall at the Giro de Rosa. She's waiting to get the all clear. Normally we catch up with her on this podcast, but she's in that process of seeing whether she is or isn't able to race. The defending champion, Annemiek van Vleuten, unfortunately, she's out, season over by the looks of it. But the Dutch, they still have so many options. Anna van der Breggen, having won the Giro Rosa yet again, she's going to be really difficult to beat. Marianne Vos, they've just got so many options. But unlike what we spoke about with the Belgians, the Dutch women, they seem to have that cohesion, even though they've got loads of potential winners in the race.
Yeah, that's a real art, I think, when a director sportif for the national team is able to bring a group of riders together who a number of them want to win the race. They come from different trade teams and get them to work cohesively together behind one leader. Very few national team directors are able to do that. How about for the time trial? Can Rowan Dennis go 3 in a row?
Yes, he can.
Let's hope so.
Absolutely, he can. Yeah, I reckon Rowan Dennis can. Grace Brown will be riding the time trial for Australia in the women's event. Luke Durbridge and Rowan Dennis. He's got some tough competition, though. Ganna of Italy is going to be tough to beat. Stefan Kung pulled out of the Tour with a few days to go, riding for Groupama FDJ. So it won't be easy for Rowan. But if anybody can get himself ready for one day, one specific effort, you know this better than I do. It's Rowan Dennis.
Yes, no doubt about it. And he's going to have some great support around him, as in I know he's taken a number of people from Ineos Grenadiers across there to help him prepare for the race. So if he's in the right space, right headspace, which I think he will be, he'll be very difficult to beat. So I'd love to see him get a third world title.
Yeah, it would be good. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the results from that one. It's been good catching up, hearing your stories from the Tour. And the next Tour de France is only 9 months away.
We don't have long to wait.
Excellent. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, leave your comments, make your recommendations, and hopefully we'll see all of you in March at L'Etape Australia by Tour de France. Thanks a lot for listening to Cycling Insights, brought to you by L'Etape Australia by Tour de France. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on your favourite podcast app, and leave us a review. We'll see you on the road.